Good evening, Mr. Kiran Mani, our esteemed guest for today's session, Honorable Director Ma'am, Professor Vinita Sahe, respected faculty and non-faculty members and dear students. I, Apurva Pandey, on behalf of Team Samatvam, warmly welcome you all to this session of Pragyan, the talk series. Organized under the aegis of Samatvam, the Mindfulness Center at IIM Bodh, Gaya. Samatvam is the concept of equanimity or evenness of mind. It is a state of equilibrium where one develops an inward tranquility and attains the stability of mind. It is the skill of waltzing through the journey of life patiently and joyfully with a dispassionate regard for success and failure, gain and loss, pleasure and pain. Samatvam, the Mindfulness Center at IIM Gaya, is an endeavor to develop mindful business leaders who embody the philosophy of Samatvam. Today we have with us an extremely remarkable guest, Mr. Kiran Mani. Mr. Mani is the Managing Director for Google's global clients and marketing partners in Asia Pacific and Japan. He oversees partnerships in the region with Google's top clients, agency, consulting firms, platform, and service partners. He is based out of Google's regional headquarters in Singapore. Mr. Mani has been with Google for 10 years. Prior to this assignment, he led Google's retail practice in the US. Mr. Mani is also a qualified public accountant and a chartered financial analyst. Prior to Google, he founded and sold a startup, Fosbury Flop, an edtech platform to crowdsource marketing solutions, creative media services. And before that, he served as the Director for Brand Marketing and Operations at Microsoft India and VP of Hardware Marketing for IBM Asia Pacific, based out of Singapore. Mr. Mani is an active investor and advisor to startups focused on the technology, emerging markets, and non-profit space. Outside of work, Mr. Mani has lived in 9 cities across 3 continents, speaks 5 languages, and has trekked the Everest Base Camp twice. He dedicates time to practice and teach mindfulness and meditation. And he believed the worlds of compassion, fun, and serious business should coexist to create true lasting value. So today, Mr. Mani will be speaking on very relevant and interesting topic, intelligence and consciousness, the interplay that's shaping humanity. To get started with the session, it's my pleasure to introduce the director of our institution, Professor Dr. Vinita Sahe, who is the second woman in the country appointed by the Government of India to head an IIM. She is also the guiding force behind Samatvam and all its endeavors. I request Honorable Madam Director to say few words and welcome our guest for this session.
A very warm good evening to you, Kiran. There's one thing which I have common with you. Like you, I'm a proud parent of 2 adorable daughters. And there's another one thing which I found in your CV, which is an aspiration for me, which is to trek Himalayas. And so I take this opportunity to actually extend a very, very warm and personal welcome, because I for sure I'm not seeing this as one odd interaction. I'm seeing this as the beginning of a journey with you, Kiran. Why am I saying so? Because you represent a good success story with a very typical left brain kind of an ability to start with. And I'm so sure as you progressed in your career, in your life, these right-brained activities like meditation, mindfulness, creativity, reaching Himalayas, all attracted you. So you are the kind of a right role model for these youngsters who are sitting today listening to you. Why it is important for us? Because we at IIM Bodh Gaya, we want to have a very distinctive advantage emanating from our legacy which is we are at Bodh Gaya, which is land of enlightenment. So we actually have decided to be true to our legacy, which fortunately for us is the need of the hour, need of the world. Today, what is needed most in the world is what this young lady was mentioning, that a total state of equanimity, a state of tranquility, because there's so much turbulence all around us. Like today only, I was reading that India has again started clocking numbers like 40,000 cases, and Maharashtra, in fact, yesterday clocked highest ever. So we thought we are out of it, and it seems we are entering it again. So there's so much of total uncertainty about everything that we do today. I'm so sure these young brains, these young minds, they must be feeling so many insecurities about themselves, about their future, about their careers, about their progression. And I think one thing beyond that education that we've given them, the technical skills, the domain knowledge that we've imparted, we really want them to go with this seed of mindfulness so that going forward, whenever they feel that I need that anchoring, at least the basic concept should be there. You must have you must have explored it as you progressed later on your journey. So when people like you speak that yes, this works and it works like magic, I think my left brain students are going to listen, are going to embrace it with much more uh, surety, if I can say. So that's the reason we bring people like you, because you have experienced and embraced it, and you can bring that success story for them to begin with. You can bring in that conviction that yes, this is the need of the hour. Going forward, the society needs to be more mindful. The citizens needs to be more mindful, to be more happy within and outside. So, Kiran, it is an absolute pleasure to invite you, to host you. And as I mentioned, we will continue to bother you because we are, as we say, young, because especially when it comes to IIM legacy, we were established in 2015. So it has been almost 5 years for us. And our campus is still coming up. We are in the process of building a state-of-art campus of about roughly 70,000 square meter. So a lot of action happening on campus. As such, we are a young campus, and we need all the support coming from all the corners. So this is just the beginning. We'll keep bothering you, and you will keep investing in us. Thank you so much for making it today, and thank you so much in advance for helping us in all our endeavors. So over to you, Kiran, with my bunch of young, positive, promising students. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Not keeping all of you waiting any longer, I would now request Mr. Mani to enlighten us on the topic for today, intelligence and consciousness. We hand over the stage to you, sir.
Dr. Sahai, Dr. Mishra, and to all the students. First of all, thank you so much for having me. Sometimes I worry about the heightened expectations that are set for a session like this. And let's say stage fright happens even when you get to my age, and especially when you have set such a high bar of an expectation on what I can bring in. But hopefully, first of all, I think I just wanted to build on what Dr. Sahai said. In a lot of ways, I think as soon as Dr. Mishra reached out to me, the sheer factor of hearing an IIM in Bodh Gaya was intriguing for me. I must confess, that's the first time I heard about an IIM there. And the first thought that crossed me was, oh my gosh, imagine the power of actually training the left brain while also being able to train your right brain. Exactly the way I said it. Or in my language, I actually say that train your brain and train your heart brain. And if those two things can work together, I absolutely believe that we are entering a golden age of leadership. where people are investing time and energy in what I believe is a brain which is 10 times more powerful than the intellect that we have worked on. So I immediately accepted this. And interestingly, the topic that I was presenting, so just I've been a student of both these subjects of what we call as artificial intelligence. And I've had a ringside view on it during my 11 years here at Google. And I also do believe that, we are at a breakaway stage in terms of what that intelligence, what that can do to mankind and many industries, which in a lot of ways, purely from a profession standpoint, many of the students are going to enter an era where the workforce is going to look very different from anything that probably you and I have seen. So and what does that look like in terms of opportunities? But also this coincides with the time when I have also experimented with the arts of mindfulness. The one thing I will tell you in full transparency is that I'm not sure that I'm a role model on anything to do with mindfulness and meditation. But what I will tell you is I have learned by making a lot of mistakes. I wish at a very young age, the thought of this was inculcated in me. I come from a deeply conservative Brahmin family, so which meant that there was always a very strong grounding of God-fearingness and religion, and so that brought at least a very strong guiding to say, when everything else fails, then you look to the Almighty. But I think in a lot of ways, melding that or molding that into really understanding that the sheer power of to guide myself remains within me has been a journey of many mistakes. So in a lot of ways, what I can tell you is what not to do. And maybe I will spend the last 10 parts being vulnerable and telling you about mistakes that I have made. And hopefully all of you, given the fact that you have had a head start of about 20 years from me, probably will not make. So 2 parts to the conversation, a prepared one. And since Dr. Sahaya asked for this, probably will spend the last 10 minutes sharing with you a journey which is perhaps more of mistakes, but hopefully that teaches you, saying that why, to Dr. Sahaya's point, I wholeheartedly agree with her that this whole thing about being a mindful leader is where the art of leadership, the art of management is heading for the future. Cool. Without setting any more expectations further, let me just walk you through about 20-25 minutes of content. This might be an unconventional presentation for you because what I promise you is not a lot of answers, but more questions. And I think that's the piece. The answers are for each one of you to figure out. I think my generation will be done by the time even we let the foundations of these principles. It's your generation who are going to take these tools. I come back and say our generation took industrial revolution and took the tools that came out of it and build the world around that. Your generation will take artificial intelligence and mindfulness and use that as tools to build the future for humanity. So my job is not to offer you with solutions, but offer you with ideas and pose more questions so that you use these tools as you go forward. I think we've been speaking a little bit about it. I just wanted to show of hands. Are you able to see my presentation? Is that pinned properly? You can just show me all right, awesome. I don't think you guys need any introduction to this topic. Essentially, when you talk about intelligence, you normally speak it in 3 dimensions. Many spiritual textbooks talk about this as body, mind, and intellect. Some others, you talk about it as Drig, Drishya, Viveka, but essentially in management terms, I will say that you probably have the body intelligence, which comes in the form of instincts. You have intellect, which all of us are very used to actually honing. We spent 20 years talking about. But then you also have a very strong form of intelligence called intuition, which probably not honed, but you always say, great leaders are always known for people who are intuitively good, right? We always speak about it. Today's presentation, I'm going to spend on the intellect and the intuition piece, not too much on the instinct piece, because that's the hindsight view, and I don't want to be wasting too much of time around that. But I think, simply put, I think what the industrial era did to all of us is that it essentially took our instincts and completely blunted it out. So, humans as we are, if you go back, you're a student of anthropology, you will realize that there was a time when instincts was what kept humanity alive, right? You had to have a fine, tense sense of taste in order to make sure that the food that you eat is not poison. Or you had to be very, very aware of your surroundings to make sure that you're not attacked by an animal or you're not stepping on a snake. You listen to birds in order to find out whether there is approaching nature. Human beings were instinctive animals. There was a time when the strongest form of intelligence, the person who actually became the head of a tribe, was the one who actually honed his instincts well. I think instincts got replaced by skills during the Industrial Revolution, and it produced a generation of us which perhaps lived with unprecedented comfort. And comfort also meant maybe a little bit of laziness. Not a little bit, quite a lot of it. So look, there's a lot that humanity learned and gained from the Industrial Revolution. There's also after effects of that. Obesity, some of the things that we are dealing with, saying that when you get through Maslow's hierarchy of food, clothing, and shelter, then human beings start asking more existential questions. Industrial Revolution never solved for that. Industrial Revolution felt that you just give more of the same material things and human beings will be happy. So I think we're at a point where we probably crossed that point even about a decade ago, where the value of what the Industrial Revolution gave humankind kind of has lived its time, right? You can see the vestiges of it with, yeah, I mean, there was a time when back in India, a person who got a four-wheeler car was considered a rich man. I think now it has become a necessity. I lived through a time when having an air conditioner in a room was considered to be a luxury. Now you all realize, yeah, it's required, it's comfortable. You get the point, which is, I think we're all living in a very comfortable society. We're all beginning our lives in a way to say that you can have more of many things, but yeah, the basics have been established. Industrial Revolution did a great job of actually making us comfortable. But at the same time, it probably blunted out a very important part of our intelligence, which was our instincts. Let's focus on what we've seen during the time of COVID. And let me speak about the last 12 to 18 months. And I think, many of you have heard about artificial intelligence and machine learning. And I think in the last 12 months, we've all seen us go behind computers, right? A session like this would have been impossible, even at the time when IIM Bodh Gaya was at its inception, 2015. If you were telling me that you could do a call with 90 people, with somebody sitting out in Singapore, and all of you listening in without interruption, yes, we had some technical difficulties, and I would say I'm not most proud about the Google Meet product from Google. It is not the most intuitive of products. So I take apologies for all the faux pas that happened when we started. But you get the idea. I think a lot has been enabled in the last 12 months. We went behind desks. We searched a lot. And I think what has been well recorded is the fact that people used digital mediums to connect. But I think there was a much more fundamental change in computing, or there's a paradigm shift that happened in the last 12 months, which went perhaps a little unnoticed. People from my era always came to a computer and called it a dumb terminal. It was a very popular term, right? Oh, computers are dumb terminals. They're just supposed to capture information. So they said, so you were supposed to be the person who was intelligent. The computer used a language of 0 and 1, the binary codes, in order to build it. But it was meant to be a processing unit, right? It was not supposed to be an intelligence unit. You processed information. But I think if you looked at everything that has happened in the last 12 months, what has happened is computers have gone from sources of information to being helpful devices. That is a massive shift in computing. Computers being called as intelligent machines has not happened before. And I think we missed the point saying that, hey, nowadays, when you type an email, you expect things to be auto-corrected. You expect sentences to get finished. You speak to computers and you expect your phone to recognize your language. Somehow, incredibly, that's meant to happen. When you're supposed to search for something, your search engine is always supposed to know exactly what you searched for. You get the idea where I'm going. Computers have become helpful. Computers are reading a lot more into your mind, and with every passing day, that's only getting better. And I just wanted to walk you through a little bit of a history about how artificial intelligence came in being. I've seen that develop in just 6 years here at Google, and many of the people who developed artificial intelligence are good friends of mine. And sometimes we joke, man, how did we stumble upon something like this? You know, if you work at Google and if you work on any aspect of innovation, if you're a product team, you essentially said that there are 3 principles of innovation. The Google X, the famed Google X lab, or people said that it's kind of the place where innovation happens. The person who runs it, he basically says whenever he evaluates an idea or whenever he evaluates a new project, he basically looks at it only from 3 lenses. Have you defined a big problem? Have you bought pieces of breakthrough technology? And have you combined all of that to come up with a completely radical solution, right? So for example, I'll tell you about, we have had spectacular failures like the Google Glass. So the big problem which they said is people all use their spectacles only to correct their 20/20 vision. But they said, can you actually make an intelligent glass? Can you actually make retail better? So that if somebody wears it incredibly, you actually know who's the person walking and what that person bought before. Can we make a glass which is intelligent? Huge problem, right? Never was it something which was supposed to be just sitting on your face solving for 20/20 vision, meant to have some amount of intelligence to it. And then we actually bought breakthrough technology. If you actually think about it, the incredibly hard piece of the technology was just engineering this thing into something as small on top of that spectacle. So you actually went through multiple versions of very small cameras. You actually then incorporated within those cameras computer chips that could recognize human voice, because you couldn't type things onto this thing. Voice was the only medium of communication with it. And then you had to make sure that somehow this thing actually connected to the cloud so well that when you asked it something, you can bring intelligence right in front of your screen. So breakthrough technologies of microchips, micromanagement, all were trying to brought together. They were not meant to solve this problem, but then you actually thought about a radical solution to come out with, right? So you get the idea and the drift to say we actually look a problem through these 3 lenses, and we say, lo and behold, there's a new thing that comes out of it. Let me apply the principles of artificial intelligence and how it came to be. So these are all my Google colleagues who all have been associated with artificial intelligence in some form. I won't bore you with the details of their own history, but the 2 pictures on the top were in some way the people who asked the most fundamental questions. So I think Fei Li, the lady on the top, she was a research scientist at Stanford, and she turned around and asked a very intelligent question. She said, look, can I show a computer 1,000 pictures of a cat? And by the 1,001st picture, can the computer actually turn around and tell me this is a cat, right? The way normally computer works is you ask the computer, show me a picture of a cat, and it shows you a picture. They reverse engineered this. They ask the question, no, let me just show the picture. Can the computer tell me that it's a cat? And then Jeff Hinton, the gentleman on the left, he actually said, that's a great idea. Maybe fundamentally we should rewire the computer language into making the computer like a 3-year-old child's brain. So he came up with a very basic computer language, which taught a computer just like how a 3-year-old would learn. This is a cat. This is a cat. Visual, audio, message. And lo and behold, at the end of the 1,000th picture, it says, stop. I know this is a cat, right? So they came up with this principle saying that, man, it does work. You actually show a lot of data to a computer, and you put it through a fundamentally different language, and the computer is actually being able to make some intelligent decisions. I think the piece that was missing was, in order for that to work, you needed lots and lots of data processing to happen simultaneously, right? Imagine trying to solve a big problem. So you needed petaflops of storage. You needed real-time data processing to happen. And that, the computers of that era were either too expensive or too not just powerful enough to solve that problem. And I think that's where the gentleman on the right who came up with an idea called graphical processing units. The idea actually came from a small part of a computer which actually processes graphics. So you need graphics cards. For people who understand computers, you know graphic cards. So graphic cards have had a very intelligent thing. Graphic cards were very powerful. But graphic cards didn't need RAM and hard drive and other things. Just needed a very fast processor, and they were unidimensional machines. They solved for only one aspect of computing, but they did that really, really well. And suddenly you said, in order for computers to read massive amounts of data, you probably don't need expensive other parts. You just need unidimensional computers, which did very, very fast processing. And lo and behold, we came up with servers which actually did just that. It was the first time that you actually implemented machines which packed so much of processing power within it. And suddenly, you looked at a machine that could actually read, have some intelligence, and then could process massive amounts of information in no time at all. All you needed was now a problem to solve for. And in came this man, Dennis. Dennis started this company called DeepMind. Interestingly, Dennis is a genius in his own right. So he had basically earned enough by the age of 19 by building computer games that he was a multi-millionaire. So he retired at the age of 19. And he said, I had enough money, and said, okay, now I want to go and study. And he actually decided to basically use all this great power that was produced. He decided to build more computer games out of it. So the very first use of artificial intelligence was actually used for building a computer game. And said, if all of you know the old Atari game, which basically just went and hit balls inside a computer screen, they just said, instead of a human playing, can a computer play it, and can a computer play it to perfection? In 2.5 hours, the computer absolutely mastered the game. And then the very first commercial solution of this was a self-driving car. So someone actually hacked into a Honda Acura car. They put a screen to it. They put exactly the same artificial intelligence technology in, and they used a computer joystick along with a computer screen and all the artificial intelligence principles. And lo and behold, they had a Honda Acura, which you pull the joystick forward, the car went forward, and you pull the joystick back, the car went back. So you see where I'm going with this. Suddenly, and look at the amount, since that has happened in just 6 years, I have seen computers completely transcend language barriers, utility barriers. And suddenly, I use this analogy. I think 6 years ago at Google, we always used to pride in speaking in riddles. The more complicated you made stuff, the more acronyms you throw about it, we almost felt that we had a halo around us. Speaking about technology had to be difficult. I think what artificial intelligence has done is it has said, look, you don't need to make electricians of everyone. You just need to offer light. And suddenly computing is no longer an industry in itself. Computing powers multiple industries, multiple problems. So wherever you have big problems and complex data sets, computing can be applied now. So is airline if an industry meant for flying, or is it a technology industry? You tell me. Are cars computers or four wheels on roads? You tell me. You know where I'm going with this. You are suddenly seeing a complete proliferation of computing into every aspect of our lives, which is also making life that much more intuitive. It is taking wherever human intelligence was otherwise required. A computer looks at it and says, no, wait, human brains are actually pretty primitive. They can only do serial processing. Computers can do parallel processing, right? Computers can take massive amounts of data. It's already shown that computers can actually play chess in a matter of 2.5 hours or learn languages in a matter of an hour, much faster, right? They do it without even thinking. This really brings me to the real question. I think the first slide that I showed you, I will, going back a slide, I'll leave it with all of you. If you came to do an MBA to find your next job option, don't fret. There was a time where even about a decade ago, everyone said that, if I did a computer engineering course and if I added an MBA, I've earned my meal ticket. You don't have to be a computer engineer anymore. You just need to have a big idea and you need to know how to solve for data sets. And every industry will present you a new paradigm, a new business opportunity. So if there are entrepreneurs in you, this is the golden age of entrepreneurship. If there are jobs, I today work for a great company. I do believe that these 3, 4, or 5 big companies will fade. If I see the amount of innovation, the amount of new opportunities and companies that are being made, just a fascinating time. COVID will come and go. But I think the world is going to be left with so many new, radically different ideas and disruptions that are happening. All I will tell you is, if you came in here looking for great employment and have financial security, don't fret. You will get there faster than every other generation before you ever got to it. But your generation will ask a very fundamental question faster than what my generation asked. Does all the financial benefits and all the gains make you happy? You will ask that faster than you do. Trust me, you will. When you sit over there, you might be wondering, what is this man speaking about? I will ask this question to you just in 1 decade. For me, it took 2 decades. In your case, you will ask that question in 10 years, because you know why? You will get to that financial freedom much faster than my generation did. That's where existential questions of artificial intelligence are being asked today. As I told you, I'm not here to provide you answers. I'm here to leave you with questions that your generation should solve for. Think about the amount of data consolidation that is happening, right? I work for one of those companies that consolidates that data. And I always worry. At one point of time, computing was meant to democratize intelligence and information. Has it actually created more wealth consolidation than any other time in history? Now, outside of these 4 or 5 big corporations that talk about technology, do you even know how to govern IT? Because just of the lack of technical expertise to do that. I was speaking actually with the person who ran the cyber cell for the Federal Bureau of Investigation of the US. He wrote a book and we became good friends. And in one of his conversations, he just told me very candidly, he actually said, your company is responsible for the degradation of computing. And feel good. But what he really meant was, he said, my entire cyber cell was 18 people. In a matter of a week, Google employed 17 of them. And I had no cyber cell left. So forget about it for a moment from a point of employment. Think about it from the point of saying that massive level of expertise. Any industry now requires a basic of computing understanding, right? And look, many of us, if you're talking to my age, there's a world of haves and have-nots. We're fast trying to bridge it, but you get the idea. Where the way we're going with data, unless and until we do something about democratizing it, we are building new fiefdoms, which are all based on the haves and have-nots of who has data and who doesn't have data. Imagine a world where now data gets into the medical paradigm. And suddenly, you're already beginning to see that when you talk about medicine, you're beginning to say that normal diseases can be solved for. We actually solved for this whole pandemic in record time, right? In a 1-year time, it's been unprecedented to have basically so much amount of vaccines floating around in just 1 year. It's just painful, but medicine has come a long way thanks to technology. But imagine what can happen in a world where people, basically because they are financially rich, can actually afford to fine-tune their brains. Would we be producing a generation of super races because some people have more data and can actually afford to fine-tune their brains? Existential questions. I don't have answers. But that's one problem. Second, what is intelligence then? If industrial revolution blunted out instincts, what is left of intelligence that a computer cannot do? I'm sad to disappoint you, has many of your education been completely wasted? You know, my generation was asked to memorize things. It was all about memory, right? How much I could cram into my memory and could vomit it on an answer paper was a sign of intelligence. Not required at all these days, right? Education needs to be completely reinvented. The human brain is going through unprecedented level of comforts now. And what is happening because of that is humans are left with time. The single most important asset, which we have no idea of how to use. So we have taken off, how did we spend time? We spent time hunting. We decided to take that away from us. Then we decided to invest all our time with our intellect, chasing ideas, chasing work. Now computers are doing it. Suddenly, mankind has time. And what do you find? We find that the real pandemic that happened was mental health. The world didn't suffer COVID. 10 times more people suffered from mental health. I don't have answers. I'm leaving you with questions. I do believe that the next paradigm, there is no escaping the fact that we are becoming increasingly a comfortable generation. Two aspects of human intelligence have been conquered and blunted. Now, will we go back to it? Will we rehone it? That's for humanity to decide. But let's talk about already a paradigm that's in often what I call as mystical, underexplored, and underinvested. Right? We come from a land of mystiques. And suddenly we speak about meditation. You know, every time I started a practice about 8 years ago at Google, where I started every one of my management meeting with a 5-minute meditation. So 2 to 5 minutes, you just start with silence. And now, by the way, it's the most popular way to begin a meeting. Because suddenly, even without people realizing, you suddenly realized people were that much more present. People were that much more congenial. Even in digital medium, people looked into each other's eyes. They acknowledged. I will tell you, one of the biggest challenges that you get when you get intelligent people together is ego. Intelligence and ego don't go well together. Meditation has a very nice way of basically putting that ego behind. And suddenly intelligence solves problems so much better. So we started that as a practice, and we found that lo and behold, our meetings were being so much more productive. Happiness index went up. For 3 years in succession, my team got voted as the happiest team within Google. Fortunately, I work for a company that cares for this, but you get the idea where I'm going with it. Small acts are already, people are saying, oh my gosh, that's mystical. How did that happen? And I do believe it's a science which has been underexplored. Humans have the brain, and humans have the heart brain. I do believe our intuitions are 10 times more powerful than our intellects. Our intuitions are the only which work immediately. It kicks in. And if all of us, for those of you who meditate a lot, will recognize, if you decide to listen to your intuition, you actually know the answer much faster than your intellect can tell you. I'm not being presumptuous here, but it just makes you that much more effective. It gives you time back in your hand, right? Because in a lot of ways, rather than imbibing what the world wants to tell you, you introspect to find what are you wanting to do. And that introspection is a process of meditation, simply put, right? We don't have to make it any more than that. It's just self-introspection to say what keeps you in flow. What keeps you, when intelligence and happiness combines, then you are in flow. And it's just a desire to find the flow. I put this back into the same method of innovation that you talked about it. In the previous slides, I spoke about the concept of innovation through the lens of technology, and I told you how technology solves for the problems. Now I want you to focus carefully on the exact same slide and look at the words that I'm talking about here. A huge problem, a breakthrough technology, a radical solution. What makes a problem huge? It's not your intellect, right? It's your intuition that tells me, man, this is a big problem. You feel it. What is a breakthrough technology? Technology is technology. What makes it breakthrough is that moment of aha that you have, saying, man, I applied my technology and I could put it in another place. What is radical? You don't learn these things in textbooks. You let it happen to you. Right? That's the moment of aha that you get. These things stare at you for decades, yet some people are able to see the connects. Yet no one has explored this as a science. People still think that there's an art to this. I don't believe there's an art to this. Humanity just needs to invest time, and they will figure out the science behind this. I think I actually took this word cloud I just Googled for it, pun intended. But look at the amount of words that are in there, which are often seen in mystical terms. All that things on the word cloud can be solved for. You already see efforts being made there. And I do believe that we will use whatever humans invented during the Industrial Revolution and what we brought out with the intelligence revolution. We will use those levers, we will use those tools to solve for these problems too, which in turn starts to hone human instinct. Will it produce another set of benefits and problems? Yes. Perhaps that is when your generation comes to my place and talks about this to the next batch of IIM Bodh there 20 years later. You will pose the questions for them to solve for it. You get where I'm going with this. I wanted to leave you with what I believe is a simple framework to think about as you think about the world where you take your intellect and you combine with the institutions. Each one of you is going to be the leaders for the future. You're going to solve this problem. I have no doubt about it. But as you solve for this intellect with this intuition interplay, think about it in a very simple paradigm. Think about it as yourself. Think about it yourself as a community. And because we all come together, I used a very simple work-life metric, right? We all come together, we spend half our lives professionally with professional people trying to solve professional problems. And then we spend another half of life with friends and family, etc. And I just wanted to leave you with those 4 boxes. When you talk about life and me, think about health and how things about health are going to change. When you talk about us and life, think about how communities are going to evolve. We are already beginning to see that just like what happened with TV, where there was a massive growth in TV consumption, and at some point of time, people got sick of it. They said, you know what, I'll go back to the TV when I need the fool's box, but otherwise, I'll still go back and live life regularly. We're beginning to see that with the internet generation. After going through a massive spike in using internet, now they say internet is in every device that I do. We live digital lives. We don't really have to obsess on the device in itself. The device should solve for problems. What happens then when people come back to communities with digitally infused lives? What happens to businesses? And what do you do with skills as an area? I think when it comes to health, I actually used a sports analogy over here. If you think about sports of soccer and basketball, I don't play either of the games well, but I was actually listening to a very interesting lecture where the person talked about how these 2 games are fundamentally different. So if you think about the game of basketball, it's a Michael Jordan. There is one great player, and there are 5 players who are trying to assist that great player to take the ball and score, right? That game is not about mistakes. You will make many mistakes, but that game is all about the big scores that you get. So you can make plenty of mistakes, but if you, as long as you keep scoring, it's a game of offense, as they call it, right? Soccer, on the other hand, is a game of defense. You may not have great players. If you have 11 average players and they stick together and your defense is strong, the game might be boring, but they're impregnable. So very different styles of playing a game. Think about this in the terms of, in medical terms. As you play defense, 90% of people who visit hospitals today can be categorized in about 25 health categories. Blood pressure, sugar, arthritis, or whatever. Machines can solve those problems. You don't really need doctors. You could actually get an answer from a machine AI in 10 years from today, much better than what a doctor can solve for. A chip underneath your eye can actually be preventive rather than disruptive. Your generation will live through an era where you will live 150 years. What do you do with that life is for you to ask that question. But you get the idea. Defense will become very strong. But then the opportunity is with offense. We already see that in sports. Sports medicine is today already about positive psychology, right? You sportsmen are no longer about their physical prowess. It's all about honing your mental prowess. So how do you think about the concept of medicine as defense and offense? How do you solve for how do you make sure that pandemics like this don't come back again? I have no doubt in my mind, medicine will evolve so rapidly in the next 20 years. It'll become affordable. If it'll become solvable, computers can solve that much more than humans can. We already spoke a lot about this, so I won't spend time. As a community, we really have to think about how do we bridge divides. The unintended consequences of data has been the fact that divides have actually gone up much more. How do you solve for it is the next question for you to really think about. I think when it comes to businesses, always come back and say, you can solve, I already spoke about saying have a big problem, have big complex data, and you could solve for it. I think the big piece that was missing over there is experiences. As you move from a world where, I take a small example of retail, we all were used to going to the nearby Kirana store and picking up stuff. Then we went to big malls to pick up stuff. Now, suddenly what we're saying is, we're not really interested in going to a mall. We would like to order something online, get it delivered at home. If you want to think about a car, when was the last time you asked a car salesman which car to buy? You already know that much better than a car salesman can sell to you. You're going to live experiences which are in the physical and digital world. Experiences are massively evolving. So a simple framework that I throw to you is, you take any business, you think about what is the experience you want to give, what sources of data do you have to connect in order to provide that experience, and what different business outcomes can you come to. This can be applied to almost any industry, and lo and behold, you have a new business idea in place. And finally, I want to leave you with this question about leadership. There are two aspects of leadership that I'll speak today. One is the aspect of leading versus managing, right? And many times, many people have a habit of glorifying leading and making managing sound as if it's not okay. I don't believe in it. Look, there are two great leaders who led Apple. Both of them led them fundamentally in different ways. Leadership is about bringing change. Management is about bringing order. And there is nothing superior or inferior about it. You need change managers, and you need people who bring order. What is different, though, is that in the past, people who brought change and people who are managers were typecast with certain behaviors. Leaders were considered to be okay to be imperfect people. It was okay to be prickly. It was okay to be self-important, right? How many leaders do we know who have this, right? After a particular point, leadership is a drug. It gets to you. It makes you feel invincible. It makes you feel that, oh my gosh, I have solved for a problem. They walk around as superstars. That era is over. In an era where information is democratized, there is no room for prickly people. You have to have the skill to get along. You know, I always talk about it as saying that there is no room for mercenaries anymore. There's only room for missionaries. There is, you know, so think about it from that aspect to come back and say, whether you manage or whether you lead, there is massive opportunities that exist. One is not better than the others. Hone your skills around, know yourself, know your personalities, and what are you really good at? Are you good at bringing order? Are you good at working with large teams and getting together? Or are you very good at spotting ideas? Both are very different skills. But what I will tell you is there is absolutely zero room. Some of the best entrepreneurs, we talked about that I work in the startup world, some of the best entrepreneurs, some of the ones who come out with the brightest ideas are not the most bright individuals. They're people who can get along. In the world of startups, you actually find you work with limited talent. You have to bring people along. You have to work with people's strengths. And some of them are intuitively just good human beings. And they spread joy. At the end of the day, when you go to a workforce, when you walk in, you might walk in for the salary. I will guarantee you, you will walk out when you don't feel happy. Nobody ever walked out of a workforce for the sake of salary. Trust me, nobody did. But when you feel you're not happy, then you say it's time to move on. They say they don't quit, you don't quit companies, you quit managers, right? So actually think about that as an aspect to come back and say that fundamental human fabric. And I'll leave you with this. I said I'll finish this talk with a moment of vulnerability, and I'll say this. I've gone through the cycle where I've tasted success at a very young age in my life, relatively young age, and it went to my head. There was a time when I was financially independent. I'd done well. I come from very humble beginnings. But from there, I did well. I worked really hard. But there was a time when I literally had the world at my feet, literally speaking, on terms. But I was the unhappiest human being soul that you could find around. I just wasn't satiated. All I wanted was my own success. I cared for my next promotion. I cared for, does my boss, I didn't care about whether my subordinates thought about me as well. I always cared about boss thinking about me well. You know what? I got ahead, but I got left behind. And it has been an incredibly hard journey to discover love, to discover happiness, to discover human connections, and to discover a better use of my time. I don't need to spend time being a mercenary anymore. I can spend time doing sessions like this and feeling great. A very good investment of my 1 hour. I now do things which make me feel purposeful and which makes me happy. Money growth is just an outcome. Think about what really drives you. Because I will tell you, your generation will be financially well off. You will ask fundamental existential questions faster than my generation. The sooner you prepare for it, the better. Thank you so much.